Better late than never. Okay, once you've traced that circle, either the number 1 or the number 3 off the template, we don't need this anymore. Hopefully you traced it light like I said to, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here to make it a little easier to see. We're going to end up erasing part of the top of that. That's why we need to keep it light. Here's probably the hardest thing you're going to do on it. It's not that hard. We need to put a circle in the center. We're going to make this look kind of like a donut right now. And I'm just going to come in here, and I want it evenly spaced from each side. So I'm going to kind of come in here and kind of make some marks so I can sort of tell where I'm going. I'm going to try to make this circle right here in the middle. I'm going to draw it really light in case I need to make some adjustments. Now if it's off by a micrometer, as far as this edge to this edge, and this edge to this edge, and this one, and this one, and this one, it's okay if it's off just barely. But it should look pretty centered. That's what we need. This is actually the pupil. We're going to draw it pretty light as well. When you finish, it should actually look more like a Cheerio than a donut. A donut would have a smaller hole in the center. The good news is on a pupil, it varies in size. Your pupil gets bigger and smaller depending on the light in the room. Things like that. Bigger when it's darker, smaller when it's bright. So they can vary a little bit and still be technically anatomically correct. We just want it to basically be round. Now, one of the problems that I have seen often when not just people your age draw eyes, but of all ages when I've taught it, is like with this drawing right here. You see how that pupil is in the upper third of the iris? This is the colored part, this is the pupil part, and it's really narrow here and here. Your pupil stays centered in your iris regardless of whether you're looking up, down, or to the side. Okay, so it's important to remember to always keep the iris smack dab in the middle, even if it's looking up, down, left, or right. Okay, it needs to stay in the middle of the colored part. Hopefully that makes sense what I just said. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to put the outline for the eyelid, this part right here. We're going to put that on it right now. That's what we're going to create right now. And to do that, we're going to come across the top third. And this line's going to angle slightly down. I'm turning my paper so I can bring it down, 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 down. Okay, so it comes across and comes down. And it's past halfway here. Okay, so it's coming down, and then we're going to bring it on around this way. And in this case, I'm going to bring it just underneath the eye, underneath the iris, I guess I should say, and bring it up. So this one will be longer, this one is shorter right now. That's just to get it started. If I get going too fast, make sure you raise your hand, tell me to slow down, okay? I don't want to get too far ahead of anybody. Now when this comes across the top, it's going to angle down at a steeper angle than the bottom is going to come along this way. So now that I've come across the top, I'm going to angle this down fairly sharp, getting near where this bottom line is, but I'm going to bring it down even a little bit further. I'm going to bring this up. This is where it's a little tricky, but not too tricky. I'm just going to curve this around and connect it back up. That is where the tear duct's going to go. See that shape there? And that's why this line needs to be shorter than this line. This has got to come all the way down here, curve around back to this shorter line, and a nice natural blend into our bottom line. try to make sure that you don't come around and do something like this. It's not a shape like that, okay? There's not a hard corner in it. It's a nice blend from this to that. Try to avoid this right here. So if you've done this, get less of a point there and more of a gradual blend in so that it looks like one line that comes around and not like a hard corner in here. So hopefully you have something that looks a little bit like a foundation for an eye to draw at this point. You'll know whether you got it too skinny or if you got it too wide. You don't want to have this top eyelid above this circle. You don't want this whole circle in your drawing. You want the top cut off. And because we cut the top off, we're going to take our eraser now and erase this out. We no longer need that part that's outside the eye itself. So go ahead and clean that up. Keeping our lines fairly light right now, because in case we got to make any changes. All right, we're going to do the upper eyelid, and that upper eyelid's going to come up, over, and down, and get a little closer down here, a little closer here, and a little higher up here. So it's going to be a parallel line. Starts just above the tear duct here, comes up above our eye. I'm going to turn my paper rather than turn my arm. Come across the top of the eye, come down, and get a little closer when I get down to. When I say closer, I mean closer to the eye itself as I come around that side. It doesn't go all the way down to here. It stops just short of that, but it does come pretty much right above where the tear duct is. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we want to highlight in our eye. We need to know where we're going to put that, so that'll be this little highlight right here that I'm pointing out with my pencil. I'm going to put this kind of in the top third and kind of angled at a diagonal towards the top of my eye. Put a light, it's like a little cutout in my pupil right here, like that. But when I come out into this colored part, I want this to be really light. I barely want to even know it's there because I don't really want that to show up. So don't draw a dark line around it right here. Please don't draw a dark line around that, or it's going to make it really hard to make that disappear. And my original circle that was in it, I'm going to erase it completely out because this needs to be white when we're finished. So when I've got that done, it can be dark in the pupil because that's going to go black, but once we leave the pupil, we want to keep this part out here really, really light. We're just kind of getting things set up before we start to go in and worry about details. Okay, we're going to move over to the tear duct, and we're going to be near this, kind of where this starts to come out a little wider. We're going to put a curved line. We don't want this to be too big. It's just a little curved line that goes from the top lid to the bottom lid, just like that. Don't put it way over here. Nobody has a tear duct that's gigantic. I mean, you barely notice them. It should be smaller. But you want to be little bitty tiny in here. And we're going to put a parallel line to this one, probably right where the bend is, basically, and bring it up to the top line like that. And then we're going to leave that alone for now. One last little housekeeping kind of thing. This top lid of the eye, don't do this to the bottom lid, but do this to the top. Go ahead and take your pencil, and we can go ahead and make that line a little bit darker. If you know that's where you want and everything looks right, I'm just going to make that slightly darker so I can see it easier. I'm going to bring that all the way down to this corner here. So now that one's a little bit darker and a lot easier to see. I am not going to do that with my eyelid or down here. Okay, I'm also going to darken this line around the outer edge of the iris now that I know where it is and I don't have to erase anymore up here. So I'm just going to come along here, carefully trace on my old line. Again, I'm turning the page constantly. And now my pupil in here, now that I know where I want it to be, I can go around it too and darken it in a little bit. Everything that I'm making darker now is something that I know that I'm not going to do any more erasing or changing to, so it's safe to make it dark. Okay, we're going to start working on the iris now, and this is what starts to bring it to life. The iris, like I say, is the colored part of the eye, this part right in here. And it's a series of lines going in and out and highlights through this part here. If you draw it this way, it looks pretty dang realistic. And that's what we're going to shoot for. And it's not as hard as it looks. It's just a matter of learning how to do it. So that's what we're going to start with right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press down, then lift it with my pencil so I get a point on the end of my line. I'm going to put a perfectly vertical line from the bottom, and I'm going to lift it up just like that. As I draw it, I'm going to do one on the top, lift it up, straight above it. Then I'm going to go one off to the left side, doing the same thing, and then one off to the right. And if they don't perfectly line up, like this one's a little off from that one, doesn't matter because we're going to go all the way around like a wagon wheel. And these are just kind of my directional lines to tell me I need to change directions as I go around my eye. Like I'll put another one right up here between it, go straight across. I'm going to keep doing that. One here, one here. And that's just some guidelines to tell me which way to go, kind of with this wagon wheel type effect that we're going to do. This is just to begin with. Comes right off the pupil and radiates out away from it. Okay, once I have that, I'm going to go in between all of these that I just drew. And these can vary in length. You don't want them too short. Just don't go beyond your iris is all. That one got really close to doing it. In fact, it just barely. Wanted it a little bit longer. so far this is pretty controlled. We're not getting too crazy with it. It's fairly controlled, but now we're going to add a whole bunch more. Here's where it starts to look more like an iris. I'm going to go in between them again. But before I move all the way around, I'm going to put a bunch more in there. And this is where we start to get it looking more like an iris, because there's a whole bunch more lines. And I'm going to do this all the way around now. I don't want too much space between them now. I want them to be pretty thick. I'm going to vary the length. I don't want them all the same length. I just want a lot of them. Be really careful when you get up here by this shine up here that you don't go inside the shine. You're going to have to go skip over to the edge right here and do this. If we do this right, we have our guidelines already on the paper telling us which angle each one of these lines need to go. And then we just add a whole bunch more. For me, doing this part of the drawing is one of my favorite parts because I know how it's going to turn out in the end. So I kind of enjoy doing it because I know where I'm headed with this. So I'll give you a second to get those on there. Now it looks like a hairy pupil, which is kind of what you want. It's really important that you have that little pointed end on the end of each one of your lines. You guys just a second to get those on there. All right, now we're going to go from the outer edge of our iris and go the opposite way. So now I'm going to take these and lift up and go towards the pupil. But I want to keep kind of the same angle. I just don't want them all lining up exactly with the lines that I just drew, though. So try not to line them up with the lines that radiate out from the pupil. Try to have them kind of like go in between. If occasionally one lines up, that's okay. You just don't want them all to line up. And these are going to be a little bit shorter. Some will be slightly longer. It's just a matter of creating a texture coming from the edge, going towards the center, and lifting up. Just make sure you got your angle right and that you don't go contrary to whatever the angle was. I mean, you're not crisscrossing. When you get up in here where the eye covers part of it, the eyelid covers, they're going to be shorter. And you might not even have any, like right in here where it's really close. Probably not going to bring any in here because it's mostly covered. It's out here. So Won't be until you get right in this area, kind of around the shine, before you put any more on there. And that probably made no sense to you, but it will in a few minutes. Now, this is not the only way to draw an eye, and it's not necessarily 100% anatomically perfect or accurate, but it's pretty close. It gets you closer than a lot of other examples. There's actually some real bizarre shapes that go right around the pupil, and I mean, if you get more into eye drawing and want it to be super realistic, there's all kinds of tutorials and things on the internet. But this is pretty good, and it'll get us pretty close. But this is not how it finishes out. If we just left it like that, it would be a very strange looking texture on the eye. That's why we have a paper towel, and it will change everything about that here in just a second. Does anybody need more time going around with those radiating lines? Okay. Just give me a thumbs up when you got that done, and then I'll go to the next step. And in this case, you need quite a few. You don't want much space between them. And it always amazes me how it can go from something like this to something that looks pretty realistic here in the very near future. Okay, what we're going to do now is fill in that pupil, and we want to make this as black and even as black as we can get it. So I'm going to start right here where that little shine is, go around that. Whenever you're filling in something black, it's best to go around the outer edge, whatever it is you're going to do, all the way around it. So like I'm going to go all the way around the edge here. And then after you've got it all the way around the edge, then come back in and fill in the center. This way you don't go beyond your edges and you don't get a lumpy edge, you get a nice clean edge. And that's what you want. And that's why I'm going around the outer edge first. Make sure if there's any white showing through that you fill it in. See, once I have that outer edge done, then it's fairly quick to go through and do the center. I'm not worried about overrunning my lines or getting it all uneven or lumpy. I've got a nice clean edge all the way around the outer edge, and that's what I wanted. Now I can come in here and concentrate on trying to get this center part just as even and black as I can. After you finish this, you probably will want to sharpen your pencil because it's going to take quite a bit of your graphite, and you're going to need a really sharp pencil for when we get ready to do the eyelashes. Pretty hard to do an eyelash with a dull pencil. Well, you can, but they don't look very good. Now, in some cases, you might have more than one highlight. There might be a second shiny spot in the eye somewhere. I'm not going to worry about that on this one. We're going to just stick with one. But if you're drawing from a photo or something, sometimes there's multiple highlights. Just be aware of that if you're doing like a realistic portrait or something later on. It's not a hard, fast rule that there's only one highlight. Okay, just try and get that as black as I can. So now I have it on there. Okay, so the next step, oh wait, does anybody need more time filling in that pupil before I go? All right. Yeah, just give me a thumbs up when you got it done, and then I'll move on. See, I get a little excited on this because I'm anxious to get to the end because I know how it's going to look. So sometimes I go a little too fast. Okay. So now we're going to take our paper towel. We have our little piece of paper towel here. Raise this up. Our little piece of paper towel, fold it over. And you've done this before. Excuse me. We're going to fold it over. And our goal is to keep folding it until we get a really nice corner on it like this. And then fold it even a few more times because we want it to be kind of a stiff, hard corner, and you get that by multiple folds. Okay, I've got it folded down pretty far, and I'm going to see if I can even get one more in there if I can. And it looks like I can. And now that's pretty hard. That's what I want. I don't want it to be soft like a Kleenex. I want that actually fairly stiff. Now I do have little blending sticks, these little things here that you guys have used before, things like this or like this. And this works fantastic for what we're going to do next, but you don't always have one handy. That's why I try to teach you guys how to do this with a paper towel, because essentially it does the same thing. The only difference is this: you can get a little teeny tiny point on it for little teeny tiny spots. This is a little tougher to get a micro tiny area. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go right from the pupil, and we're going to go out, and we're going to lift up. We don't want to take it all the way down. We're going to try to leave kind of a little highlight that goes all the way through the center. So I'm going to go just like this, and I'm softening this up. I'm trying to blur this down a little bit. And I'm going back and forth. I'm dragging some of that out of the pupil. Just going back and forth all the way around. Now I'm lifting it up a little bit here and there just to break it up so it's an uneven edge. I don't want a perfectly straight edge all the way around the outer edge of this part I'm smearing. I want it to be a little bit uneven. And already that starts to look a lot more realistic. Just by going around there and smearing that just a little bit. Just make sure that all your rub marks are going in the same direction as the lines you have radiating out from the center. Don't go the opposite direction of them. Don't like go this way across the middle or horizontally across the bottom or the top. What I'm doing now is just looking to see if I got anywhere that's just kind of even. I'm just trying to break it up a little bit so I don't have an even edge around that outer part. Then along the outer edge of the iris, I'm going to come along here with my pencil and I'm going to go just a little darker and bring it just a little bit into the inner part of the iris. I'm using the side of my pencil. I'm not necessarily going black along here. I'm just making it slightly wider and using the side of my pencil to do this because this is going to be what we're going to use to smear from the outer edge. So I don't want this too thick. I just need it a little bit so I have some graphite on the paper that I can smear around. I want it dark, but I don't necessarily need it black. Now don't come up underneath the upper eyelid and do that. This is just the iris itself, the outer edge of it. So when you get up here, you don't come across here and make it dark. Please don't do that. Or that'll cause us all kinds of grief. Okay, once we've done that, it's going to be the same principle as what we did with the pupil, but now we're going from the outer edge. We're going to rub that in, keeping it kind of uneven. You'll notice it's going to lighten up your outer edge. And that's fine. You don't want to go all the way in because we want to leave this little highlight right here. Make sure you don't fill it all the way in. Kind of softening everything as we go around. I'm picking it up, press down, pick up, press down, pick up as I go around. I'm leaving that little bit of a highlight going through the center, all the way around. Now, if you accidentally fill in some of that highlight, it's not the end of the world. That's what an eraser's for, and I'll show you how to use it here in a few minutes. To help with the texture. The main thing we're trying to do is just kind of soften these hard lines that we put on first. Those radiating lines, it just kind of softens them a little bit. Gives us a little darker edge around the outer edge. Man, does that look like a whole lot more realistic than it did just a few minutes ago. It's starting to look a lot like an eye, which is a good thing because that's what we're trying to draw. Doing that, I'm going to take a quick look at yours. Okay, now that I've softened that edge, I'm just going to go back along my outer edge just a little bit with my pencil and slightly darken it in. Because if you actually look at somebody's eye, there's usually a little bit of a darker ring around the outer edge. Some people, it's actually a dark black ring. If you got lighter eyes, light green, light blue, something like that, sometimes it's not as dark. So that's why I'm just kind of going right in between. I'm not trying to make it black, but I don't want it to be too light either. But I do want a distinct edge around it. Okay, we're going to put a little shadow on here. We're going to ignore this highlight for right now that comes all the way through here. We're going to come back and touch that up here in just a second. We've got a little bit of shading we need to do before we worry about that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come along from the top eyelid, and we're going to shade a little bit and get lighter and lighter and lighter as it moves down into the body of the eye. So it's pretty dark right up here and gets lighter, lighter, lighter. And what this is your eyelid sticks out further than your eyeball, therefore it casts a slight shadow onto your eye. And we're going to take that right across here into that colored part of our iris and cast that shadow down into our iris too. So some of that is going to cover up the highlight that would be going across the top of our iris, and that's fine, it needs to. It might even get a little bit into our highlight right there, but it probably won't get too much into it. So I'm going to do that all the way across and get lighter, lighter, lighter as it comes down. Come over here, darken that a little bit more. I'm going slightly dark, but I am going to come back over with my paper towel, and I'm going to smooth that up, and I may have to go back over it again. But in this case, I don't want to use that really dark point that I have on my paper towel right now. So I'm going to refold it, because if I use that right now, that'd make that a super dark shadow, and I don't want that to be a super dark shadow. So I'm just going to redo what I did before so that I have a nice white corner to start with. Not doing anything special, we're just recreating this little blending stick of our own. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start at the lighter part first and work my way up to the darker part of the shadow. I'm going to go all the way across. And then this bottom part, I don't want to use that little hard corner. I'm just going to tear a little bit of paper off my paper towel. And this is where I actually want a softer area. So I'm going to let this be a little bit softer. It's not all folded up. And I'm going to go along the bottom here so I can just get a nice blend from dark to light down onto my eyeball itself, the white part of the eyeball. I'm just softening that out. Like that. So it's a nice dark to light and looks really soft when it gets down here and just fades to white is what I want it to do. Because I rubbed on it, it got a little bit lighter right there, so I'm just going to come back in and darken that a little bit. also notice I'm a little bit lighter up in here. So I'm just going to take some of my black from my pupil right here, get that little bit of black on there, and bring that in here and redarken that edge just a little bit through here. Because it got softened and lightened up just a little bit. I'm just putting it back. And hopefully just by doing that, it makes you kind of get the vision of where we're headed with this and how real it can look with just a few little minor adjustments. Okay, if you accidentally had part of this disappear, your highlight, like right up in here, it's getting a little gray, you can just take the edge of your eraser and take it and lift it, just barely drag it across, and you actually draw with your eraser. And you can bring some of this back in here. It's important that you use a kind of a sharp edge to do it. I'm just going to put a little bit in here. I don't want too much up high because that is in shadow. You can see that I can just draw it right in there if I want to. Some of this is a little too much. I'll just knock it back a little bit. So do that if you need to. If you don't need to, there's no reason to go back over it. If you've already got a good highlight in there, it's not necessary. Most of mine I have a pretty good highlight, so I don't need to do much of that. Now, the lighter the color the eye, the more of a highlight would be on this. This would be more like a medium brown or medium blue or medium green, something like that, medium to darker. If it was a really dark eye, like if you had really dark brown eyes, really dark green, really dark blue, of course there would be less of a highlight, but it would be more intense. It would be brighter against the dark, but it wouldn't be quite as big. And then if you had super light eyes, it would be a really wide highlight. And eyes come in quite a variety of colors. I think two of the more unique colors I've seen is light green and light brown. Just a show of hands, anybody know somebody with light brown eyes? I've only seen it once. My youngest brother has light brown eyes. I didn't even know it was a thing or was possible. But they're kind of cool looking because I don't know anybody else that has that. Establish my shadow there just a little more. What I'm doing right here is just right at this upper edge, right where the eyelid is. I just need to make sure that shadow's there, pretty consistent. Fade it down into my lighter area. So it's not just dark light, but actually has a nice fade from dark to light. Okay. I'm just being a little persnickety there. It's just bugging me, so I wanted to fix it. Now, if we've done this right, your highlight, when it's finished, you won't have a line around it. It will just look like a white spot on your paper. That's what it should look like. We're going to go down here to the tear duct, and I'm going to darken this line right here. I'm going to darken this line, the parallel line. I'm going to darken all the way around the tear duct till it meets up with that bottom eyelid. Just like that. I've darkened that all in now. And we're going to leave some highlights on it. So if you don't pay any attention to any other part of the video, I hope you're looking up at the screen right now. Try to zoom this in. For the highlight, I'm going to follow the contour of this section in here. So I'm going to come around here and I'm going to put just like a little line that follows it just like that. So it's going around and starts to curve around. And then it'll blend right in. And this is all going to be black. And then I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller. I just want it to curve around like that. So it gives the illusion of making a bend right here. And then for this part right here, I'm going to make that a little bit darker. And I'm going to just leave a little teeny highlight coming through there too. I'm going to make that really small though. So I'll hold that up closer to the screen so you can see what I've done there. It's just a little, those are not very big, okay? They need to be kind of subtle and kind of small, those highlights. We don't want to draw all the attention of the drawing to the highlights on the tear duct. They just need to be there, but not be like dominating in the picture. And that top part of that highlight, actually, I'm going to shade over just a little bit right there, because that upper eyelid does cast a shadow all the way to the corner. It's kind of intimidating looking at that up at the screen. It actually looks quite a lot like a real eye. So it's like getting stared at for the whole hour. And hopefully you're enjoying it a little bit, being able to draw something that looks a little more realistic than something like that, okay? I mean, if you're drawing like that, that's actually pretty good as opposed to this or this, either one of those two. But we're taking it, like I say, to a whole other level here. All right, is everybody this far? Does anybody need a second before I move to the next step? I don't see any hands, so I'm assuming we're okay. Now I'm going to go along the inside of the bottom eyelash here, and I'm just going to lightly shade along here. I don't want to go very dark with this. I'm starting right on that edge and getting a little lighter as I move into the eye. I'm going to smooth this up with my paper towel here in just a second. Now, why did we go to sleep? Come on, wake up. There we go. Kind of important that your pencil's sharp so you can see what you're doing and where your lines are going here. This will not be as dark as what we did on the upper part. In fact, it's quite light. And it's to the inside of the eyelid, not to the outside. Taking my time because I don't want to get too dark on this. I've just got it started is all. Then I will take and refold this again because I need it to be a white, clean part. So poor paper towel gets the living heck folded out of it today, but that's all right. It helps serve as a very purposeful tool. Okay, I've got my little white part now, and then I'm just going to soften this from the edge. All the way across. I want that texture of a soft kind of a fleshy looking type texture, and I don't want it to be dark. And then when I get right here, I'm getting kind of a line forming. I don't want that, so I'm just going to soften it with my paper towel so that I don't have that line forming right there. Now if it gets a little too dark, again, I'm going to bring my eraser in here. I can make highlights. Wipe that off. I can soften the edge of those highlights with the paper towel. But when you look at an actual eyeball, a photograph of one, or actually just turn and see what your neighbor's eyes and stuff looks like, the mistake a lot of artists make is making the white of the eye too white. And there's actually not a whole lot of white because most of it is in some kind of shadow. Now, I want everybody to sharpen their pencil before we go do the next part. You need to have a really sharp pencil because we've got to draw this next part really accurately, and I'm even going to go sharpen mine real quick because we need pinpoint accuracy on this next part. I don't know what the points on your pencils look like, but mine came out kind of weird, but it is pointy, so we're happy. Hopefully something go weird with your pencil or what? Yours is long and skinny. Oh, just your pencil's getting small? Yeah, well, I think it's going to make it to the end, though. Okay, so here's a little thing that a lot of artists miss. As you get better and better, you'll start to learn to notice things like this. But when you're first starting out, a lot of times this kind of stuff does get missed. And what it is the bottom eyelid, there's actually a little tiny white separation right there. And what that is your eyelid comes out from the eye and you're looking at the top of that eyelid. It's like a little shelf right there, and that's why that little highlight's right there. And a lot of times what I'll see on artists that are just beginning, they'll make the eyelash come from right here next to the eye instead of having that little separation. Now on the top you don't see it so much because that's angled down. You're looking at the top of this, you're not necessarily looking up at the bottom of the top eyelid, so we won't see it so much on the top. So to get that and create it accurately, we're just going to put a very light line that comes through here. I see that I've got a little overrun here. Let me get that off of there. Okay, we're going to put a little light line that separates, and this thing is just a hairline wide that separates the eyelid from the eyeball. Okay, and when I say hairline, let me hold this up close. See that line I'm creating? It's super small. It's kind of like reflected light, but in this case it's not reflected light. It's an actual change in the plane of the eyelid. I mean, it's going at a different angle, different plane. And we do it all the way over to the other end. So from one end to the other. I'm just putting a light line there just so I don't forget that that has to be there. Okay, it's just a little parallel line that goes all the way across. It's super light. I'm going to turn my drawing this way for the next part. I'll give you guys a second to get that on there, and then have you turn your drawing. Holy cow, it's going to take us 2 days to do. We'll finish it up next Tuesday, but we're going to get a little further today. All right, in this corner near the tear duct, I'm going to come along here, and I'm going to start shading right up to it, and I'm barely touching my paper because I want this to be light. It's coming up to kind of a little point, and then I want it to come down and kind of follow the same angle as the bottom of the eye. And what this is the lower eyelid. It's just a slight shadow we're trying to create here. We're not trying to go crazy with this. It's important that we keep this very, very, very light, because if you get too dark, it's going to look like a black eye. And I'm going to go all the way across the eye and put just a little bit all the way across, and very, very light. And it's just kind of establish this edge here so it shows up a little bit better. And then when I get over to this side, I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other end of the eye. Come down a little further, angle it out, and kind of establish where that other edge of the eyelid's starting to form. Again, keeping this all really, really, really light. I don't want to go all crazy dark with any of this. This is another problem area for a lot of people learning to draw, is they'll put this on too dark, or they go all the way across and make it look like a big bag under the eye instead of an eyelid or a black eye. Or just, this is a very light touch part. It can go slightly darker up here in the corners, and then fade out, and slightly darker on the bottom edge and fade out as you move up. But I mean very slight. We're not going crazy at all with how dark this is. And that's why a lot of times I say you need to learn pencil control, because right now it's going to take quite a bit of it. Smearing it won't fix things. Okay. Once that's done, we can pretty easily see where that little white edge is. That's going to be kind of our guideline for our bottom eyelashes when we get to them. Now the upper eyelid's a little different story. It's a darker crease. The shadow's going to be darker, and it's more pronounced on our upper eyelid. So that's what we're going to go to next, and we're going to start kind of right in the middle right here. We can go fairly hard with this one. But right here, it's going to be kind of dark. It's going to fade a little bit as it gets to the ends, and then we're going to blend this and take it down towards the eye. But in this case, I'm going to start off really light so I can gradually build it up. But I'm going to go almost all the way, almost to the very bottom of the top of the eyelid right here. Start off light to begin with, and then I'm going to gradually make it darker and darker as I go. A lot of times women and you girls and stuff, you'll go a little darker. You put makeup on here and it darkens it, and you put all kinds of fun colors and things to just highlight a little bit. We're pretending this is just a black and white situation, but we do this before we do the eyelashes, though. Kind of got it established, and I'm going to even go a little bit darker with it. I'm just gradually building this up. Right where that crease is needs to be pretty dark. again, I'm going to take just a little piece of my paper towel and just tear a piece off. I'm not going to fold it much, maybe just twice, just so I have kind of an edge to see what I'm doing. And then I'm just going to try to bring that across here, maybe just once or twice. I'm just trying to smoothen this a little bit, just to change the texture slightly. That's all I wanted to do there, and then I'm going to come right here and do that just a little bit on the bottom, just to change that texture slightly. And it's just to soften it so it looks more like skin instead of a hard edge. Just soften everything up. Whenever you do that, it does lighten things, so you might have to come back in and darken that little crease a little bit. And it's just, if it's a little too dark against the eye, you can just take your eraser and highlight across it. And that's what I'm going to do right here. Not going to go too crazy with it though, because I don't want to have that get too wide. And that's set up pretty good for what we need to do on Tuesday next week. I think will be the last time, or next time I see you guys. Just kind of a bummer for me because, like I say, I really like my blue days. I like you guys. But we'll get to it on Tuesday next week, and we'll finish up. We'll put eyelashes on it, an eyebrow, shade kind of the part between the eyebrow and the eye. And this will be a pretty killer-looking drawing. So, and then you'll get to practice them for a day or two, and then we'll do one for a grade. But in the meantime, let's just enjoy the non-graded part. Okay, so if you've got it to that point of completion, go ahead and set it on the back table. Make sure you got your first and last name on the back, and we'll get ready to go.